Welcome back everyone. Today we're going to take a look at the Nintendo 64, a console that not only defined a generation, but also marked a significant leap in gaming technology. Launched in 1996, the N64 was Nintendo's entry into the 3D gaming era, introducing players to immersive worlds with its innovative use of analog control through its iconic 3-prong controller. This console was home to some of the most beloved games of all time. However, amidst the classics were some games that stirred up some debate, and that's what we're going to look at today. Here are 10 controversial Nintendo 64 games. South Park, released in 1998, was an adaptation of the then explosively popular TV show created by Trey Parker and Matt Stone. This first-person shooter was immediately controversial due to its source material, which was known for its crude humor, profanity, and social commentary. The game attempted to capture this essence, featuring the show's characteristic toilet humor, cursing, and satirical take on American culture. However, the decision to bring such mature themes to a game on the Nintendo platform, traditionally seen as family-friendly, sparked significant debate. Critics questioned whether the game's content was appropriate for the N64's demographic, especially considering the platform's history with more child-friendly titles. The game included bleeped-out profanity and weapons like urine-soaked snowballs, which, while toned down from the show, still pushed the boundaries of what was considered acceptable in video game content at the time. Moreover, South Park became a focal point for discussions around game quality and licensing. The game was developed by Iguana Entertainment, using the same engine as Turok 2 Seeds of Evil, which led to expectations of a certain level of gameplay quality. However, the game was criticized for its repetitive levels, lackluster graphics, and uninspired gameplay mechanics that failed to capture the show's dynamic humor and narrative. Fans of the series and gamers alike were disappointed, leading to public statements from Parker and Stone expressing their dissatisfaction with the game. This dissatisfaction highlighted the challenges of game development based on popular IPs, especially when the creators have little involvement in the process. The South Park game on the N64 thus became a case study in the pitfalls of video game adaptations, the ethics of licensing, and how controversial content can translate into interactive media, sparking conversations about creative control, quality assurance, and the responsibilities of developers when adapting culturally significant shows into games. Carmageddon 64 released for the Nintendo 64 in the year 2000 and was a port of the notorious PC game Carmageddon 2, and it became instantly controversial due to its violent gameplay mechanics, where players could earn points by running over pedestrians. To navigate the stringent content guidelines of Nintendo, the developers changed these pedestrians to zombies, but this did little to quell the controversy. The core concept of gaining points through destruction and vehicular homicide, even if directed at undead creatures, was still seen by many as promoting reckless behavior and violence. Critics argued that the game's premise, while less graphic than its PC counterpart, still retained the essence of its controversial nature, leading to debates about what kind of violence should be permissible in video games, especially on a platform like the Nintendo 64. Beyond its thematic content, Carmageddon 64 was also criticized for its technical execution, which only added fuel to the fire of controversy. Developed by Software Creations and published by Titus Interactive, the game was panned for its poor controls, terrible graphics, and overall shoddy porting from PC to console. IGN famously gave it a 1.3 out of 10, calling it ridiculously poor software, farted out as a quick, sloppy port. This criticism wasn't just about the game's quality, but also about the ethical considerations releasing such a low-quality game under a well-known controversial title. Seemingly to capitalize on the franchise notoriety, the game became a symbol of the pitfalls of rush ports for licensed cash-ins, igniting discussions about game development practices, the the integrity of game adaptations, and the responsibility of publishers to deliver a product that respects both the original version and the platform standards.
Shadow Man, I sneak and I creep. I'm the Shadow Man, I'll eat all your apples. I'm the Shadow Man, I'll steal your book.
Shadow Man, released for the Nintendo 64 in 1999, was an action-adventure game based on the comic book series by Valiant Comics, and it stirred controversy primarily due to its dark themes and mature content. The game follows Michael Leroy, who becomes the Shadow Man, a voodoo warrior tasked with preventing an apocalypse by collecting dark souls from serial killers. The narrative delves into heavy subjects like death, the afterlife, and serial murder, with character designs and environments steeped in horror and gore. This was a significant departure from the typical fare on Nintendo's platforms, leading to debates about the suitability of such content on a console often marketed to families. Critics questioned whether the game's depiction of violence, psychological horror, and its thematic exploration of voodoo were too intense or inappropriate for younger audiences, or those expecting lighter, more Nintendo-esque games. Moreover, Shadow Man faced controversy for its portrayal of cultural elements, particularly voodoo. The game's use of voodoo as a central mechanic and narrative device was seen by some as potentially misrepresenting or exploiting an actual religious practice for entertainment. While the game aimed to be respectful by providing some background on voodoo and its lore, the simplification and the context in which it was used in gameplay raised concerns about cultural sensitivity and accuracy. Additionally, the game's marketing and packaging emphasized its dark, gothic aesthetic, which might have misled or disappointed players expecting a different experience based on Nintendo's reputation. Shadow Man thus became a talking point about the balance between creative storytelling, cultural portrayal, and the responsibilities of game developers in representing complex themes and practices, especially on a console like the Nintendo 64. Forsaken 64, released in 1998 and was a port of the PC and PlayStation game Forsaken, but it garnered controversy for several reasons. One being its content and how it was adapted for Nintendo's platform. The game's narrative involved a post-apocalyptic Earth where players control bounty hunters using hovercraft-like vehicles in a 3D environment, engaging in combat with both human and robotic enemies. While the original game was known for its mature themes and violence, the N64 version toned down some of these elements, such as reducing the gore and altering the language. However, the core gameplay still involved high-speed action and destruction, leading to debates about the appropriateness of such content on a console typically associated with younger gamers. Critics argued that even with these changes, the game's intense action and themes of survival in a lawless world might not align with Nintendo's family-friendly image, sparking discussions on game ratings, content suitability, and the extent to which games should be censored or altered for different platforms. Another aspect of controversy surrounding Forsaken 64 was its quality and execution. Developed by Iguana UK and published by Acclaim Entertainment, the game was criticized for its poor performance, including frame rate issues, control problems, and graphical inconsistencies when compared to its PC and PlayStation counterparts. The game's attempts to maintain the fast-paced, 360-degree movement of the original often resulted in motion sickness for some players due to the lack of smooth camera controls on the Nintendo 64. This led to a backlash from gamers and reviewers who felt that the port was a missed opportunity to showcase the console's capabilities, instead of offering a substandard experience. The controversy was not just about the game's content, but also about how it represented the challenges of porting complex, graphically intensive games to the Nintendo 64, raising questions about development priorities, technical limitations, and the expectations set by previous console versions of games. Turok, Dinosaur Hunter, released for the Nintendo 64 in 1997, and became a subject of controversy primarily due to its graphic violence and mature themes, which were quite bold for a Nintendo platform. Developed by Iguana Entertainment and published by Acclaim, the the game placed players in the role of Turok, a Native American warrior tasked with preventing an evil warlord from using an ancient weapon to conquer the universe. The game featured intense first-person shooting action against both human enemies and dinosaurs, with the latter being dispatched in gory detail, including dismemberment and large blood sprays. This level of violence was unprecedented for Nintendo consoles, leading to debates about content appropriateness, especially since the Nintendo 64 was often seen as a family-friendly platform. Critics and parents alike questioned whether the game's gore was too much for younger audiences, prompting discussions on game ratings, parental controls, and the direction of gaming on Nintendo systems. Beyond its violent content, Turok Dinosaur Hunter also stirred controversy with its cultural representation. The game's protagonist, Turok, was based on a character from Valiant Comics, where he was depicted as a Native American time-traveling warrior. However, the way Native American elements were portrayed in the game, including Turok's attire, weapon, and the mystical aspects of his abilities, led to discussions on cultural appropriation and sensitivity. Some argued that the game simplified or misrepresented Native American culture for the sake of a thrilling sci-fi adventure, lacking depth or respect for the cultural heritage it drew from. This sparked broader conversations about how video games handle and represent cultural identities, especially in a time when representations were becoming more scrutinized. Despite these controversies, Turok was lauded for pushing the technical limits of the N64, offering expansive levels and impressive graphics for its era, which contributed to its commercial success and cemented its place in gaming history. Before we move on with our list, I'd love to know what you think so far. Sound off in the comments below if you're enjoying this video. And while you're down there, be sure to hit the like button. It helps out more than you know. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming videos. Okay, back to the list.
Wacky video game action. Rated E for everyone. Disney's Donald Duck Goin' Quackers available now.
Blues Brothers 2000, released for the Nintendo 64 in the year 2000, and was a game adaptation of the film sequel and became controversial for a variety of reasons, including its quality and perceived disrespect toward the original Blues Brothers legacy. Developed by Player One and published by Titus Interactive, the game was criticized for its substandard gameplay, graphics, and overall execution. Players controlled Elwood Blues on a mission to reunite his band, but the game was panned for its clunky controls, repetitive levels, and lack of innovation. Critics argued that the game failed to capture the charm, humor, or spirit of the films, instead offering a generic platformer experience that felt rushed and uninspired. This led to debates about the ethics of producing quick, low-quality game adaptations to capitalize on film franchises, especially when they bear little resemblance to what fans loved about the original material. Moreover, Blues Brothers 2000 was controversial for its timing and association with the film that was already considered a disappointment by many fans of the original Blues Brothers movie. The game's release came 2 years after the film, which itself had been met with critical and commercial failure, being seen as a pale imitation of the 1980s classic. The game, therefore, was perceived not just as a bad adaptation, but also as an extension of the sequel's tarnished reputation. The decision to create a video game based on such a poorly received film was questioned, with some seeing it as an attempt to salvage or exploit the franchise's name without regard for its legacy or fanbase. This sparked discussions about the integrity of video game adaptations, the impact of film failures on related games, and how developers and publishers handle or mishandle beloved IPs, contributing to a broader conversation on quality control and respect for source material in the gaming industry.
Midway presents War Gods. All too easy.
War Gods, released for the Nintendo 64 in 1997, was an adaptation of Midway's 1996 arcade game, and it became controversial for several reasons. primarily its content and quality. The game was heavily inspired by Midway's Mortal Kombat series, featuring similar one-on-one fighting mechanics, fatalities, and a focus on gore. However, War Gods was criticized for its poor character design, choppy animation, and overall lack of polish, which made it a target for mockery rather than praise. The violence, including the infamous fatalities, where characters could be gruesomely dismembered or destroyed, was seen as a crude attempt to ride on the coattails of Mortal Kombat's success without offering much originality or gameplay depth. This led to debates about the overuse of violence in video games as a selling point, especially when the execution was considered subpar compared to its inspiration. Moreover, War Gods stirred controversy with its marketing and expectations it set. The game was hyped as a significant entry into the fighting game genre on the N64, promising to deliver a 3D experience that would rival the best in the market. However, when it launched, it failed to live up to these expectations, offering a 3D environment that felt more like a 2D game with added depth rather than a fully realized new dimension in fighting games. The game's controls were awkward, with the quote-unquote 3D button on the Nintendo 64 being particularly criticized for its placement and functionality, making the game less intuitive to play. This gap between marketing promises and actual gameplay quality led to discussions about honesty in advertising within the gaming industry, the ethics of game development, and how developers sometimes rush product to market, potentially damaging their reputation and the gaming community's trust in new releases. Vigilante 8, released for the Nintendo 64 in 1999, and was an adaptation of the vehicular combat game originally launched on the PlayStation. And it sparked controversy due to its content and marketing strategies. The game's narrative revolved around a fictional oil crisis in 1975 America, where two factions, the Coyotes and the Vigilantes, battle over control of oil refineries. The controversy primarily stemmed from the game's depiction of violence in a setting that resembled real-world political and environmental issues. Players could use weapons like machine guns, rockets, and special attacks to destroy opponents' vehicles, which, while common in vehicular combat games, was criticized for possibly glorifying violence or promoting a destructive approach to resolving conflicts. Critics argued that the ad was irresponsible, potentially promoting a negative image of gaming and reinforcing fears about video games being a bad influence. This incident highlighted broader societal concerns about video game content advertising practices and the responsibility of game publishers in managing how their products are presented to the public, particularly to younger audiences. Despite these controversies, Vigilante 8 was praised for its gameplay and multiplayer features, contributing to its cult status among fans of the genre. Quest 64 was released for the Nintendo 64 in 1998 and became one of the most debated RPGs on the console due to its quality and expectations. As the first RPG for the Nintendo 64 in North America, it carried immense anticipation, particularly since the console had been criticized for its lack of RPGs compared to its competitors. However, Quest 64 was met with disappointment for its simplistic gameplay, lack of depth in story, and numerous technical issues, like repetitive music and high encounter rates that made exploration tedious. Critics and fans alike pointed out its underwhelming graphics, unengaging narrative, and a battle system that felt dated even for its time. The game's simplicity was seen as a betrayal to RPG fans who expected innovation or at least a comparable experience to the genre's offerings on other platforms, leading to discussions about Nintendo's approach to RPGs and the capabilities of the Nintendo 64. Moreover, Quest 64 was controversial for its marketing and the hype it generated. It was promoted as a groundbreaking RPG that would showcase what the Nintendo 64 could do for the genre, setting expectations sky high. However, the game failed to deliver on these promises, leading to a public backlash that included negative reviews and a tarnished reputation. The game was often cited in discussions about what could have been if given more development time, or if the developers had a better understanding of what made RPGs appealing. This situation highlighted broader issues within the gaming industry about the dangers of overhyping product, the responsibility of publishers in setting realistic expectations, and the challenges of genre-specific development on platforms with unique hardware limitations. Quest 64 thus became a case study in game development, marketing strategy, and the delicate balance between innovation and meeting consumer expectations in the RPG community.
A bad fur day.
Conker's Bad Fur Day, released for the Nintendo 64 in 2001, was a landmark game for its time, primarily due to its controversial content, which starkly contrasted with Nintendo's family-friendly image. Developed by Rare, this action platformer featured Conker, a red squirrel navigating through a world filled with adult humor, violence, and themes like drinking, swearing, and even defecation. The game was rated mature by the ESRB, a rarity for a Nintendo platform, reflecting its inclusion of toilet humor, sexual innuendos, and a narrative that satirized everything from pop culture to the gaming industry itself. This departure from Nintendo's usual content led to debates about the appropriateness of such games on their console, with some applauding Rare for pushing boundaries, while others criticized it for potentially corrupting Nintendo's brand identity or appealing to an audience not typically associated with the platform. The controversy around Conker's Bad Fur Day was not limited to its content, but extended to its marketing and reception. Initially conceived as a more child-friendly game named Conker's Quest, then to 12 Tales, Conker 64, but eventually landed on the Conker's Bad Fur Day, and it underwent a significant transformation to cater to an older audience after feedback from players. This shift was seen by some as a bold move to diversify Nintendo's game library, but it also raised questions about how far the company should deviate from its established reputation. The game's marketing, which included a trailer that parodied The Matrix, was both praised for its creativity and scrutinized for its mature content. Upon release, Conker's Bad Fur Day received mixed reviews. It was lauded for its humor, voice acting, and gameplay innovation, but also criticized for its potentially offensive content and whether its shock value overshadowed its gameplay merits. The game thus became a focal point for discussions on game ratings, the direction of gaming narratives, and how developers can balance creativity with respect to platform legacy and audience expectations. As we wrap up our journey through this first part of controversial games on the Nintendo 64, it's clear that this console wasn't just about the iconic Mario and Zelda adventures, but also served as a battleground for some of the most debated titles in gaming history. Games that pushed the boundaries of what was considered acceptable on a Nintendo platform, challenging the company's family-friendly image with mature themes, graphic violence, and satirical content. These games sparked discussions about content appropriateness, the ethics of marketing, and the evolving role of video games in cultural conversations. While they stirred controversy, they also demonstrated the industry's willingness to experiment with narrative and gameplay, even if it meant risking alienating a portion of their audience or facing backlash. In hindsight, these controversial Nintendo 64 games have left a significant mark on gaming culture, illustrating how video games can be a medium for more than just entertainment. They can challenge societal norms, provoke thought, and even initiate change in how games are rated, marketed, and perceived. The controversies surrounding these titles have contributed to the ongoing dialogue about what games should or shouldn't be, how they influence players, and the balance between artistic expression and commercial responsibility. Whether you view these games as bold steps forward or missteps, they undeniably played a role in shaping the diverse landscape of video game content we see today. They remind us that gaming, much like any art form, can be a reflection of society's complexities, controversies included. Thank you for exploring this fascinating chapter of gaming history with me, and let's keep the conversation going about where gaming has been and where it's headed. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. What are your thoughts about these controversial Nintendo 64 games? Let me know in the comments below. If you liked this video, please leave a like. If you didn't, that other button seems to work pretty well too. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a plethora of gaming-related content, including but not limited to controversial games. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.